Imagine yourself around 2050 with commitments, investments, and innovations. Most global companies have reached carbon neutrality. Economies have transitioned towards more resilient and sustainable models, and societies are more equitable and inclusive. But let's rewind a little. That world is yet to come. And there is still much to do to decarbonize the construction world and the industry, to preserve natural resources, and to deal with the challenge of rapid urbanization. In these times of fast change, we at Saint-Gobain are addressing right now the challenges of climate change, resource protection, and access to decent housing for all without delay. That is why we choose a purpose that calls for action, making the world a better home. We see it as a question of both power and responsibility. The power to grow by designing, manufacturing and distributing the highest performing solutions and scaling them up worldwide for our customers. The responsibility to have a positive impact on everyone's life by providing individual and collective well-being while caring for the planet. Grow and impact. This is the path we are on for the years to come, driven by the passion and engagement of our 170,000 employees around the world. We want to bring pioneering responses to the huge needs for building renovation, resource-efficient construction, and industry decarbonization. Together, we want to create value through innovative solutions, providing both performance and sustainability. We want to leverage the power of data and our company values and culture to lead the way. We want to be the worldwide leader in light and sustainable construction, improving daily life through performance solutions.
Prvo, dobar dan ili dobroveče, ipak dobar dan i dobrodošli na Svečanu Dodelu Nagrada, ovaj završni događaj 46. Salona arhitekture i naravno u sklopu toga i predavanje Amande Levit, koje ćete imati prilike da čujete za recimo 10 minuta. Ja se zapravo ovde nalazim na ovom mestu zato što je večeras direktorka Muzeja primenjene umetnosti Biljana Jotić sprečena da dođe, nažalost, tako da me uvalila u ovu veoma nezahvalnu poziciju da stojim za ovom govornicom i pročitam. Zapravo vas pozdravim i kao kažem, zahvalim što ste došli još jednom. I ja ću na početku zapravo pročitati njenu pozdravnu reč, tako da vas molim za trenutak pažnje. Uz izraz poštovanja svim prisutnim i žaljenje što nisam u mogućnosti da budem deo večerašnje svečanosti, želim da pozdravim prvenstveno svoje koleginice i kolege sa kojima smo prošli ceo ovaj proces koji prethodi večerašnjem događaju i zahvalim Amandi Levit što se odazvala pozivu muzeja i što je večeras ovde sa nama. Od ideje do realizacije dug je put. To je možda i najveći izazov koji postiče da svake godine sa odgovornošću pristupimo u savršavanju ovako važnje godišnje manifestacije, Salona arhitekture. Muzej primenjene umetnosti, pored baštinjenja istorije arhitekture i vremena koje je prošlo, aktivno učestvuje u savremenim tokovima, a Salon arhitekture je manifestacija sabiranja svih tih procesa. Salon arhitekture, ili kako ga sve češće zovemo Mesec arhitekture, Muzej primenjene umetnosti organizuje kroz saradnju sa relevantnim organizacijama koje svaka na različit način deluju u savremenim arhitektonskim tokovima. U cilju sveobuhvatnijeg pristupa posmatranju i vrednovanju arhitektonskog stvaralaštva kao važnog dela nasleđa i identiteta struke, 46. Salon arhitekture realizuje se kroz saradnju institucije muzeja i vaninstitucionalnih organizacija Udruženja arhitekata Srbije, Asocijacije srpskih arhitektonskih praksi i Ženskog arhitektonskog društva. I ovim putem im svesrdno zahvaljujem na uvek progresivnoj i veoma dobroj saradnji. U slojevitoj organizaciji kakva je realizacija Salona arhitekture, pokretačku tačku predstavlja savet koji kreira i oblikuje manifestaciju Salona. Ovim putem toplo se zahvaljujem kolegi meni, Slobodanu Joviću, članu tima Muzeja primenjene umetnosti, kustosu u Muzeju primenjene umetnosti, zatim Vesni Cagić-Milošević ispred Udruženja arhitekata Srbije, Žaklini Gligorijević ispred Ženskog arhitektonskog društva i Marku Korošicu ispred Asocijacije srpskih arhitektonskih praksi, koji su činili savet 46. Salona arhitekture. Nastavila bih sa zahvalnostima, pa ispred Muzeja primenjene umetnosti posebno se zahvaljujem doktorki Mileni Stojković, Saši Begoviću, doktorki Miljani Zeković, Dejanu Lahu, članicama i članovima, zaboravila je ovde Zorana Abadića, članovima i članicama žirija 46. Salona arhitekture na odgovornom i predanom žiriranju, kao i predavanjima koje su kolege iz ministarstva, kao i predavanjima koje su dokumentovane i žive na YouTube kanalu Muzeja primenjene umetnosti. Dodajem u ovom delu i saradnju sa našim dragim koleginicama i kolegama iz Ministarstva građevinarstva, saobraćaja i infrastrukture, Božani Lukić, Nebojša Anteševiću, s kojima smo realizovali dva panela koje su zapravo u susret Nacionalnom arhitektonskom forumu. Zahvalnostima nikad kraja, pa samim tim putem zahvaljujem se pokroviteljima 46. Salona arhitekture, Ministarstvu Republike Srbije, a i sponzorima koji postaju deo tradicije, a to su Alumil, Ako, Sengoben, Mega Koncept i Rehao. Zatim i medijima koji su sve ove nama važne teme prenosile široj javnosti i na kraju, a nikako ne manje važno, celom timu Muzeja primenjene umetnosti na čelu sa Dejanom Cvetković i njenim vizualnim identitetom Salona. Uzvikujući slogan 46. Salona arhitekture imamo svoju politiku, čestitam svim učesnicima, a posebno nagrađenim, pohvaljenim i onima kojima se uručuje priznanje saveta. Toplo vas pozdravljam svakog ponaosob. Direktorka muzeja Biljana Jotić. sad mogu da se vratim da pričam o muškom rodu, ja sam, pošto sam to zaboravio na početku, Slobodan Jović, kustos Muzeja primenjene umetnosti, i večeras ću biti zapravo ovde domaćin na ovoj bini. I sad, nakon ovog uvodnog i pozdravnog govora, imam zaista veliku čast da najavim predavanje koje će slediti, koje je zapravo plod nekog zajedničkog razmišljanja čitavog saveta Salona arhitekture. Mi smo svakako hteli da na ovoj završnoj dodeli nagrade imamo nekoga značajnog govornika iz inostranstva koji bi došao i predočio svoj rad, a takođe bilo nam je značajno da taj rad bude aktualan u ovom momentu i nekako smo onda vrlo lako došli do toga da je potpuno dobro za u ovom momentu da pozovemo Amandu Levit, da dođe, da održi predavanje s obzirom na to da se projekat nove zgrade Beogradske filharmonije nalazi u nekim završnim fazama projektne dokumentacije i da smatramo da je to dobar trenutak da vidimo zapravo šta ćemo i to ovde u Beogradu dobiti. Amanda Levit je arhitektinja, dobitnik Stirlingove nagrade i direktorka arhitektonskog studija ALA. I pronounced good, okay. I danas će vam prikazati šire od onoga zapravo što je samo zgrada Beogradske filharmonije, zapravo prikazati njen najznačajniji rad njenog studija i u tom kontekstu prikazati i objekat koji nas sigurno u ovom trenutku najviše zanima u Beogradu. Ja ne bi dalje dužio i pozvao bi Amandu Levit da pristupi na binu. So, Amanda, please, stage is yours.
Thank you, Slobodan, for inviting me. Of course, I have absolutely no idea what you said about me, and I'm just hoping that it was nice. Anyway, it is a great honor to speak at the 46th Salon of Architecture, and it's really wonderful to be back in Belgrade. Even though we have worked on the Belgrade Philharmonic Concert Hall for over 2 years now, I'm very conscious that we arrive as outsiders. And so for me, this is a great opportunity to show you the work of our studio, to show you how we think, how we design, and what's really important to us. So this is where we work. It's a fabulous Georgian house in Bloomsbury, and all of the team, we're 35 people, we work on multiple floors in this building. But when you push the front door, you have to take your shoes off. And it's a great leveler. We've been doing this for years, even when we were Future Systems. And this pile, kind of messy pile of shoes, it's very un-Japanese, it's always a mess. It speaks of who we are. It speaks of all the different individuals who make up our studio, but also a common sense of endeavor. And even though we work in this now very historic building, and it's listed and protected, it hasn't stopped us from designing very contemporary work. And in fact, I enjoy the contrast of the surroundings and the work that we produce. Going back to 1999, this is a building as Future Systems, the media centre at Lord's Cricket Ground. It was all about innovation. It was the first all-aluminium building in the world. It was built by a boat builder. And it was really the project that launched us as a practice. This is Selfridges in Birmingham, about 4 years later. It's just a shop, but we invested it with huge ambition, and it's now become very much a part of the identity of the city of Birmingham. This is the largest project we've ever done. It's in Bangkok, 1.5 million square feet of retail and a 35-story hotel that is operated by Park Hyatt. And this site is actually on the gardens of what used to be the British Embassy. And it was the most expensive piece of real estate to change hands. And we'd never worked in Asia before. And so we really wanted to find a way that the building would speak of its place and where it came from. And this is, by contrast, this is in London. This is the headquarters for B. It's a huge shed, and we persuaded the client to go from cellular offices in multiple buildings to be under one roof. And it's the largest timber cassette roof, I think, in Europe. And it has the most lovely modulated north light. And this is a theme that you will see that runs through our work, because using daylight that is free, that is energy free, but in a way that doesn't let in the solar glare and solar heat is really important, and we all have to do that as architects. And this is the museum in Lisbon, the most spectacular site. On the waterfront, it's the westernmost peninsula of Europe, and you can actually see the moment where the river, the pattern of the water changes, where the river becomes sea, and it's where the great explorers set off. And we really wanted to kind of express that sense of openness in the design of the museum. But there was a real kind of built-in paradox, which was this fabulous waterfront is cut off from the historic city by 4 lanes of highway and railway tracks. So the first thing that we did before we really started designing was to persuade our client and then the city of Lisbon and the mayor of Lisbon, who then became the prime minister, that this museum, however beautiful it was going to be, would not function or be successful unless we could help people easily get there. So we identified a square on the other side of the railway tracks from which we could span a bridge at grade and then land on the roof of the museum. And it was that move, that sweep of the bridge that actually informed every move that we made. And this roof is now like a town square in the air. And it is as much a destination as the museum itself. In fact, I would argue that it is probably the roof that has captured the public's imagination and contributed hugely to the success of the project. And not only can you see the fabulous views over the river, more importantly, particularly for the people of Lisbon, you can look back and see the historic city, which is a perspective that previously you didn't have. And this is a photograph that I love. It was actually on the opening weekend of the museum. 80,000 people came. That's more than 15% of the entire population of Lisbon. So there was something that we did that had captured the public's imagination. And what looks like planting on the roof, that is not planting, it is people. And the whole of the waterfront, because we took the steps into the water, and the whole of the roof was just teeming with people. And we did something here that was very untypical for an architect. We did not build as high as we were allowed to build. And the reason for that was absolutely essential for us and for our thinking, because this was all about a design of a building that helped reconcile a city that was cut off from its waterfront. So we had to make sure that the views from the old city to the water and the reciprocal views back were not impeded by a high building. And it then meant that this is a very kind of low-slung, stretched building that doesn't pose any kind of challenge to the historic industrial power station, which is part of the art campus. And it has made it feel very much part of the waterfront rather than something that is a barrier in any way. And this is a museum for big art. There's no collection. It's all installations that respond to a theme or respond to the architecture of the space. And big spaces for big art. And this is a fabulous installation by Hector Gamoras. And the circulation through the museum is around this oval space to get into the other gallery spaces. So circulation and galleries become one, and not a single square meter of space is wasted. And because it is a museum for three disciplines, art, architecture, and technology, each of the spaces flows from one into another. So there's this very kind of fluid movement from one gallery to the next. And we made sure that even though we were partially below the water table, which had huge, as you can imagine, technical and engineering challenges, but that was in order that we preserve the views, we wanted to maintain daylight. And we designed the roof light so that the geometry would let in only the north light. And from that, you would be able to look up and see the overhang of the roof, which was there to create shade for the outside space, and to see the sky, and to see the ceramic tiles that clad the building and are on the underside of the roof. And we chose for the glaze on the ceramics, this very neutral glaze, because we realized after months of being on site and observing what happened, we didn't need color. We just need to provide a neutral canvas so that the light and the weather can create its magic. And this is what happens at sunset. It's as though the building is on fire. And at dusk, it's a completely different persona where it's almost like pewter. So always your perception of this building is changing. And the building, because it's very long, it's a huge expanse of elevation, we designed these three-dimensional tiles so that they would reflect on different facets and on the edge of the tiles. They would reflect the light, and that is how you get the kind of maximum animation of the sun on the building that allows it to be transformative according to the season and according to the time of day. And the steps we took down to the water, partially in the shade where the roof overhangs, was again a very important part of the public space, and making that as important as the museum itself. And there is this fantastic moment that I wish I could say we'd deliberately designed, but we came upon it by chance. But now we know a bit more about acoustics. From having done the concert, I think we'll know how to do this next time. If you stand at the top of the steps, underneath the overhang of the roof, and you shut your eyes, you can hear the waves from above you, because the noise of the waves is bouncing onto the underside of the roof and then into your field of hearing. And it is a kind of magic moment. And it's these little details that root a building in its place that mean that it can be nowhere else but there. And the public, somehow the building really struck a chord, to the point that a group of local musicians felt emboldened to use the facade of the building as a musical instrument. And it's just a wonderful example of the public appropriating a building in ways that you could not have imagined. And I think it speaks also to the importance sometimes of under-designing and just letting people and time add to the whole persona of a place and a piece of architecture. This is the, back in my hometown in London, the Victoria and Albert Museum. Very grand entrance, but very imposing. But it is a very progressive institution. And in maybe more ways than one, the original architects for the V&A, this photograph was taken in 1863, the original architects and the engineers. 150 years later, our team and our engineers in exactly that same spot. And I think I don't need to explain, but it says a lot about the progress that we have made. And this is the site that was given to us at the competition stage, a completely forgotten space that you couldn't see from the street. And I want to show you, there was a competition before we did the competition that Daniel Libeskind won, and he won it with this scheme. And I remember seeing that scheme thinking, no, just no. Anyway, for one reason or another, that project never happened, and they had another competition. So we took the polar opposite position, rather than creating building as icon. And for me, in a way, the Libeskind building kind of represented the end of that era. We wanted to create the iconography of place and really focus on the public place, on the courtyard, creating a new way in, giving people visibility of a part of the museum that had previously been completely concealed. But to do that, we had to overcome a huge challenge. And I show this here because you have a lot of historic buildings in Belgrade. And it is very important to preserve buildings, preserve history, but it is also important to keep buildings relevant and to breathe new life into them. And we knew, even at the competition stage, that for this new entrance to work, we had to repurpose this solid stone screen. We had to let people, we had to invite people in. And so we argued that the purpose of the screen was no longer to hide, but to reveal. It was a very hard argument to make with the planners, but we were resolute and we had well-argued heritage and conservation ideas behind it, but we also argued that public accessibility and the kind of democracy of entering a hallowed place like the V&A overrode the heritage concerns. And this is the new way in. It is a completely different way of entering a museum. It's more informal, it's more playful, it kind of resets your expectation of what the museum is. And this oculus that you see, you can look down and see the gallery below, because of course the big raison d'etre of this project is the new gallery space below ground. And to make sure that this new gallery space was totally integrated into the fabric of the museum, rather than put new stairs in the courtyard, which is what all the other competitors did, we did something more complicated. We actually underpinned a wing of the V&A, and those beams and columns are literally supporting the weight of history, because we argued that if you enter through the original museum, but in a very dramatic, theatrical way, it will make sure that this part of the museum is seen as part of the whole, rather than a new wing that has been added. And at the bottom of the stairs, there's this magic moment where there's more daylight than when you started. It's about being careful about manipulating daylight, making sure that there are kind of moments of drama, but also moments where you let in the light. And every hour of every day of the year has been calculated so that you know how, if as a curator you want to use natural light, you know where it is. Curators, though, are very, very conservative, and obviously a lot of exhibits can have no UV at all. So generally, the curators leave the shutters closed, like in the Chanel exhibition, which was absolutely fabulous exhibition. But there was a show recently of Donatello where they, for the first time, opened the shutter and you could look from the courtyard down at this sculpture, which is animated by natural daylight. And it was really a kind of a moment of great joy because it was what we had always intended. And the courtyard, you know, it's used for parties. It looks kind of very part of the place, very settled, but it was far from easy to do it. And this is a drawing that just speaks of the complexity below the surface. And you will all know about that, but it's a complexity that I enjoy, and you somehow want to feel that complexity in the pattern of the tiles on the courtyard. And what has happened since the new entrance is open is the museum is just used in a different way. People think about the V&A differently, and the institution feels differently about itself. And this is the kind of event that happens. And this is just letting this is an evening event where literally the energy of the city comes right up close to the museum, and the energy of the museum goes onto the street. But I think my favorite was of installation last year to celebrate Ramadan. And it was not just about an installation, it was literally a new way in for a community who don't often visit the museum. So the courtyard is just, it's a gallery without a ceiling waiting to be filled. This is a very small project by comparison. It's a Maggie's Cancer Centre. It's all, the brief is all about well-being and uplifting and making people who are suffering from cancer and their families and their friends have a sense of calm. This is not where you go to get medically treated, it's where you go for some respite. But we were given the most unprepossessing site we have ever had, a corner of a car park. And so our first notion was, how can we bring a bit of magic to the car park? So we imagined that there had been a piece of the New Forest here, and the New Forest is a beautiful woodland, ancient woodland, quite near to the hospital. And we could imagine that this piece of woodland existed, and that we carve out of that the building. It is as though the landscape was there first, and then the building arrived. Very simple organization. And we wanted the materials to feel of the earth, and we used ceramics again. I mean, we are a bit obsessed by ceramics, and you'll see them later in your project. But it's because this is a material of the earth, and it makes the building feel grounded. It makes you feel comfortable. And inside, again, how do you maximize the light? How do you get the light to just softly come into the room, the way that you shape the arris of the roof light to create this kind of focus. And the focus always in these Maggies is the kitchen. It's where people come together. And there are private spaces and contemplative spaces, as well as spaces where people come together. And the glazes that we have for Maggie's, we developed specially with Kumela, who did the museum in Lisbon. And we went with the client and we chose and we mixed glazes that would only be for the Maggie Centre. And we chose them to really accord with the landscape and with the bark of the trees, these very kind of soft, kind of pinky blush colors. And it's a way of integrating landscape and architecture. And some of the more private spaces are solid, and we use this kind of rippled stainless steel. It gives you a kind of impressionistic reflection of the landscape, much softer than if it was just a sheer surface. And at sunlight, at sunset, it just captures and refracts the most beautiful light. And this project is all about capturing the sun. This is a building for nuclear fusion. And fusion is the process that powers the sun and the stars. And it is the great white hope for an energy source that will save the world. And this is a facility, a testing facility, outside of Oxford at the UK's Atomic Research Centre. And you might think, oh, we normally do cultural buildings. It's kind of, you've never done a fusion facility before. And absolutely, we've never done a fusion facility before. But we know how to use architecture to message. And here it's about messaging the technological optimism of this extraordinary technology that might change the world. And about taking away the fear of nuclear, because there's no nuclear fallout. It's only nuclear because of the incredibly intense temperatures inside the fusion machine. But by making it transparent, by arranging it around the fusion machine, which was completely different from the way that the engineers and the physicists had imagined the building, we can message the centrality of the fusion machine, but also how benign it is and how positive it is going to be. And it is an extraordinary machine. And there's this kind of ultimate sliding doors moment where very thick walls, 4-meter deep concrete walls, which are essential to contain the machine, are opened at a certain moment. And we made sure, because this is all about a transformative energy system, that this building is also sustainable. And we have designed a solar chimney so that the air that is trapped between the outside of the concrete and this very fragile skin helps to cool the machine. And we let daylight in a space that you wouldn't, in an industrial, hard piece of architecture that you would not usually expect to have this kind of attention. And it's, you know, how do you, it contributes to making a very hard technology feel soft by having this kind of fragile skin. And then on the outside of the concrete is a foil, so you get this kind of sense of depth. And we had to almost do a PhD in fusion because we were challenging preconceived wisdom as to how you lay out a fusion facility. We had to become so confident in understanding the logistics and the techniques that go with it. And it wasn't just about challenging the configuration and doing a radial layout. We also challenge, why don't you stack the capacitors 3 high, because you can make it more efficient, and it made the building smaller and it makes the building cheaper. So while we had no previous experience in this field, we now feel ready to do the next one. And wherever you are in this building, we made sure that you have a view both of science and, if you turn your head, of nature. And we have rewilded the space around the facility on what is a very, very hard industrial landscape, completely unexpected. Because that is what we should be doing. Wherever we can, we should bring nature closer to us. And that's what this project is all about. This is actually a competition that we failed for the reimagining of 52 hectares around the Eiffel Tower in Paris. But the reason I show it, firstly, I'm very proud of the thinking behind it, but because it is emblematic of our responsibility as architects to push our clients to bring nature closer to our cities, because everybody will benefit from that. And it was really hard when we started looking at this vast site and walking the site. How can we bring coherence to this place? But it was very clear that this site needed three things. It needed Parisians, because the Parisians weren't using it, it was just tourists. It needed water, and it needed landscape. And so we set about trying to create an îlot de fraîcheur. So at Trocadero, which is the highest point of the site, it's very mineral, it's very hard. And we transformed that by creating this kind of îlot de fraîcheur, to bring nature in, to bring water in, because it is the highest point of the site. And it is, you know, it's a homage to the car. It's a roundabout, and we turned the roundabout into a pond, and we redirected the traffic elsewhere. And in this pond, you see your first reading of the Eiffel Tower. It's as if we've transported the Eiffel Tower from the other side of the Seine into the pond, and it's the start of the story. And the story is about how do we quench the thirst of the city? How do we, using just the rainwater that falls from the sky, not to waste a single drop, and to use the natural gravity of the site to let nature flourish. And this is the Varsovie fountains, which at the moment they have traffic around them. We relegated the traffic to the underpass so that we could create this kind of amphitheatre-like space around the fountains for Parisians, for families, as well as for tourists, and just make it feel more comfortable. But the fountains are wonderful in summer, but in winter they're turned off. And so we collect the rainwater in the winter that naturally falls and comes down into this pond, and we plant it with lilies in baskets, and the exact same species of lilies that Monet so famously painted. And before summer starts, the baskets are gently taken out and then repositioned and put in other new ponds on the site, so that even in winter, this space has a new persona. This is Pont d'Iéna. It's a bridge that is not used by pedestrians, Parisian pedestrians. It's used by tourists, and it's used by cars. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of Branco Bridge, and I just want you to hold on to that thought as I speak to this. And so we have rerouted the cars. We have taken up the tarmac and replaced it with timber and marble cobbles in lines that actually speak to over the centuries, the bridge has widened. And so the material changes from cobbles to timber cobbles to mark that sequence in history. And the central section is still for buses, but now it's a calm place. Everybody wants to be there. And having made that move, and actually this does happen in Paris now, it's only a small step to close the bridge to traffic entirely on a Sunday. And this is what actually happens throughout Paris now in kind of no-car zones, and just create this as a living room for Paris. And I was just, as I came from the airport yesterday, I was thinking, I couldn't, imagine Branco Bridge as a playground for Belgrade on a Sunday. And the base of the Eiffel Tower, it's a mess. It's just tawdry, tourist, it's unpleasant. It does not honor this extraordinary structure. And it's the lowest part of the site. And so we have created a pond that captures the water as gravity flows from the top of the site. And we've even made the act of queuing to get into the tower pleasurable, because the queues are actually within a landscaped labyrinth. And every 15 minutes, the water that is naturally collected in this pond appears in a mist. And it's kind of For me, it's a metaphor about our wider intentions here, and maybe our wider intentions as architects, which is to use the minimum means for the maximum effect. And it's kind of a nice segue into your project. This is an extremely important project, obviously, for us, but far more so for Belgrade and for Serbia, because this is the biggest investment in culture for decades. Just before I begin to talk about the project, I want to acknowledge our partners, Zabriskie. They are the local architects that everybody would dream of having. They have an extraordinary work ethic. We simply could not have done or be doing what we're doing now without their expertise, without their support, and without their humour. So thank you, Zabriskie. This is one of the drawings we did at the competition stage, and for me it holds the promise of the project, because architecture and music are probably the greatest symbols of community without borders that we have. And we set out to give that form. And really the overriding notion was to create an expression of harmony, harmony between landscape and architecture, harmony between East and West, harmony between cultures. And in what the jewel of your city is Great Wall Island. I know no other city in the world that has this complete wilderness, this uninhabited wilderness in the middle of a city. And we really want to honor that by literally and figuratively extending its reach. And we are working with the fantastic landscape architects, VDLA, to rewild the entire parkland and beyond what we were told was our site as the new setting for the concert hall. And we are planting 800 new native trees. So it will be the most extraordinary way to approach a concert hall in the middle of a city through a rewilded landscape. And what a vantage point. I mean, this is, I think there is no more beautiful geographic confluence in a city anywhere in the world, overlooking the two great rivers of Europe. It's such a strategic site next to the Palace of Serbia, the Museum of Contemporary Art. It looks towards Old Belgrade, and it is the place from which to project a message of a progressive vision for Serbia's future. And the building is 4 performing venues arranged around a central space. So a huge concert hall, a smaller recital hall, a place for experimental music, and then a place for outdoor concerts. But all a building in the round, approached from all 4 directions. So this is so much more than just a concert hall. This is a social space. This is a place where you can come and hang out for the day, where you can use the library, where you can sit in a warm space and use the Wi-Fi. You can just hang out. You don't have to be coming to a concert. But of course, you will hear people practicing, you will see the buzz, and hopefully that you will be enticed next time you come to go to a concert. And it's very important that we find ways to animate this space at all times, even when there isn't a concert being played. And this is a drawing that we did that just speaks of the struggle that is design. Each of these contours represents a siting of the building that we have tested, and we've had to avoid trees, we've had to avoid existing foundations, we've had to avoid electrical lines. It is the complexity that is design, but that is what drives us, and to then take all of that constraint and turn it into something positive. And it's a building that is about harmony and literally about the harmonics, about rhythm, about the movement of the conductor's baton, and how can we capture that in a piece of architecture. And we have created a lake here because this place used to be marshland. It is why Belgrade exists. It allowed the people to flourish here because it was marshland. And in a sense, this attenuation pond is a reference to that, the very beginnings of the city. But not just that, we use the pond to reflect the building. So you get this kind of double hit of the movement of the conductor's baton. You also see it in the pond itself. And there's something kind of magic that happens in the twilight hour when you come to a concert and the sun is just fading. And we are working with ceramics again to find the right colour of glaze, the right colour of clay that will work with the kind of magic of the southern light that you have in Belgrade. And the way that the entrance is lit, it just invites you in. So it's no big steps, you just wander from a kind of woodland setting into a concert hall. And this is the entrance for the musicians. It's slightly more private, slightly more discreet, and with a beautiful tree that marks the changing of the seasons. And coming through this woodland, this kind of lush, rewilded and replanted area, you come across the concert hall. And at night, something different happens, because here we're now revealing the practice rooms, the rehearsal rooms, some of the kind of back of house spaces that you wouldn't normally see to the public. And it is magical what happens at night. But we're using here for the first time a tile that is concave in its section. Because when you have a tile that is concave and you apply a glaze, the glaze pools at the bottom of the tile. So you have a greater intensity of the colour at the bottom than you do at the edges. So it's these kind of little tricks that are going to give a kind of texture and a grain and really animate this facade. And here, depending on the light, here it looks a very kind of neutral colour, but it will change, just like Lisbon changes according to the sun. But we're going to do something a little bit different here. We want to bring a softness to this place, not just through the landscape, but in the very materials. So the clay, the base clay that we are choosing has this kind of pinkish tinge. So when you apply a white glaze on the pinkish tinge, you just get this kind of soft aura of a sense of a hue, not something that is completely white. And then at night, of course, the way that you can light it, there's the drama, the kind of red carpet moment. It takes on a very different character. And this is the social space. You know, in a way, this is partly why the concert hall exists, and certainly in the form it does now, is the focus on a public town square inside the concert hall. What you see here is the edge of the main concert hall and the kind of pink scalloping of the auditorium. You can see the view of nature through the windows and the most extraordinary light that you will get from above. And so I'm now going to just show a short, very short little sequence that shows how this space is going to change at different times of day. How it will be different. Each time you come, you will have a different sense of the space. And this is more in evening mode, just before a concert, people gathering to have a drink. It will be an exciting place to be, even if you're not going to a concert. And the materials that we're using here also speak of a kind of robustness, because there will be thousands of people using this building, but also of a softness. And we're using this kind of dusty pink. I would even say that perhaps there's something, just a little bit of femininity brought into this space to just soften the edges. And the scalloping of the edge of the balconies and the auditorium is about the acoustic form of the building. And so when you're looking from above, you get these moments of real kind of drama and perspective looking down to the social space below. And Mozart so beautifully said that music is not just about the notes, it's about the silence in between. And this idea of in-between spaces, and this is the in-between space between the concert hall and the social space, and this is why we're giving it such focus, to bring a kind of poetry to that space. And I want to take you now into the main concert hall. We want it to be a cathedral-like space, as though it has been carved out of stone. And the reflectors and the acoustic reflectors and the balcony edges are perhaps appearing to float within this huge volume where the ceiling is part of the walls. And we want to literally take a piece of your city and bring it into the concert hall. And you know that the literal translation of Belgrade is White City, and it's called White City because of the extraordinary white marble in your city and in your buildings. And we are at the moment talking to the authorities. Can we reopen some of the disused marble quarries locally? Not scar the land any further, but just use offcuts, because that's all we need, just little tiny pieces, and use those pieces to line the inside of the main concert hall. Because it's the texture and the grain that you need. And it is a way of creating a kind of heroic space, an assertive space, a vivid space that actually speaks of the way the orchestra feel about themselves and the music that they make. It is a very unique orchestra that I have had the privilege of sitting in on a number of rehearsals. And there is something so moving and extraordinary about the musicians, because they have had to become so adaptable, because they are working in a space that is not world class, and they need a space that is world class. So this is what happens at night. The lights are dimmed, the white marble that is the scalloping of the internal walls is the acoustic. So it's a complete synergy between form and acoustics. And if you're looking from above down onto the stage, the reflectors, everything is integrated. All of the techniques, all of the lighting, the speakers, integrated into the design of the reflectors themselves and the balcony edges, which is apparently quite unusual. And just to, this sense of being enveloped, of being in this cathedral-like space, but in a piece of white city. And there is a beautiful moment in a book I read when we were starting on this project, which is about the rebuilding of the Fenice Opera House in Venice. And there was a moment where, when it burnt down, one of the craftsmen went in to try and retrieve what they could of the wooden carvings. And he picked up a carved angel and he brought it out and he said, this wasn't there just for decoration. This was there to make sure that people never felt alone. And it was something that was so powerful, and I hung on to it. And we are looking for our carved angel moments. It's not literal, but where we can add a little bit of focus to rub gold leaf into the texture of the marble so that you can focus, soft focus, on something rather than feeling alone. And this is the recital hall, smaller for 600 people. We're using local Danube oak. This is about a more intimate expression, about warmth, about enveloping you, that you're cocooned by culture and music. And really focusing on the warmth and the richness of the timber, and then the ceiling, the roof, just disappears. And because this is such an important project, we want to use it to tap into the skills and the expertise that exists in Serbia. And we know that there are fabulous craftspeople who work with wood in extraordinary ways. And we want to work with them to texture the wood, which is the lining of the walls, because we need texture and we need a gradation of texture. So to use their artisanship to bring a grain and a very Serbian sensibility to the very material that is containing the music. And when the curtains are needed for a different kind of music, the way the drapes work, the color of the drapes, is all coordinated with the color of the timber so that it feels as one. And from the stage, the view that the musicians, or rather the conductor, will have of the space, with this very kind of dramatically darked out ceiling and the warmth that is reflected from the timber. And this is the experimental studio. It could be performance, could be for electronic music, a much smaller space, and where the public can, if they're not attending the performance here, can look through the window down at what is happening. So even if you haven't bought a ticket, you have some experience of the place. And this is the podium, which is, again, a social space, but can be closed off. It can be used for rehearsals, for performances. It looks out onto the fabulous, rewilded landscape, and it is from where they will, in summer, have the famous outdoor concerts that the Belgrade Philharmonic put on, where the outside of the building becomes the stage, becomes the backdrop, and it is designed to host 25,000 people. No one knew better what Belgrade needs than Ivan Tasovac. And we are working tirelessly with Zabriskie, with our entire team, to realize his vision. And I just want to emphasize, this is not about an architectural legacy. This is about something much bigger. It's about the rebirth of Belgrade. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much for this inspiring lecture, and I have to say I am amazed because I'm now much more into the project. I'm amazed with the level of detailing in the project. So thank you very much for this. We are now just talking. If someone have some question,
but if you don't,
yeah,
it doesn't
if
matter.
you don't, so
we can just do the awards.
Yeah,
which is what everyone is waiting for.
So,
Yeah.
Amanda,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Dobro, mislim da je u redu da odmah počnemo sa delom koji se tiče nagrada Salona, odnosno priznanja, pohvala, nagrada i velike nagrade Salona. Za početak ćemo dodeliti priznanje Saveta Salona. Ovo priznanje, ja se nadam da me čujete dobro, ovo priznanje je dodeljeno prvi put prošle godine i kao jedna ideja koja je, čini mi se, veoma dobra, odlučili smo da je nastavimo i da ovo zaista postane jedna tradicija Salona, to je da Savet Salona arhitekture dodeli priznanje. Ovo priznanje, znači, nije priznanje učesnicima Salona, ovo priznanje će se dodeljivati pojedincima ili organizacijama koji su svojim radom, da li dugoročnim ili svojim nekim pojedinačnim aktima, doprineli tome onome ka čemu mi zapravo svi težimo, a to je povećanju kvaliteta arhitekture, promocije arhitekture i isticanje vrednosti arhitekture kao discipline. Ovo priznanje, znači, dodeljuje Savet 46. Salona arhitekture i ja bih zamolio prisutne članove Saveta da izađu ovde i da stanu sa mnom. Ja ću ih predstaviti. Znači, pored Biljane Jotić i mene, tu je Marko Korošec, arhitekta, Vesna Cagić-Milošević i Žaklina Gligorijević, pa molim vas stanite ovde iza mene da bi se lepše slikali. Dosta smo razmišljali o tome kome ovo priznanje treba da ode ove godine. Prošle godine nekako je to bilo vrlo jednostavno, zato što smo imali jedan tako značajan događaj kao što je usvajanje nacionalne arhitektonske strategije. Međutim, ove godine se takođe, kao kažem, nekako vrlo lako i jednoglasno došlo do toga da ovo priznanje treba dodeliti organizaciji koja ima jedan veoma fokusiran i veoma plemeni cilj, a koji se zapravo tiče dokumentovanja, zaštite i promocije modernističkog nasleđa u Srbiji, te večeras ovo priznanje dodeljujemo organizaciji Dokomomo Srbija, ogranku organizacije, znači internacionalne organizacije Dokomomo, koja je organizacija koja već dugo godina, ja sam i lično upoznan sa tim, veoma vredno, u tišini, čini mi se, ali radi izuzetno značajan posao, a to je da dokumentuje, vrednuje i promoviše modernističko nasleđe u Srbiji, što moramo reći da u ovom trenutku nam je nešto što je više nego potrebno, naročito, kažem, u aktualnom trenutku. Pozvao bi Draganu Mecanov, predstavnicu Dokomomo Srbije, da primi ovo priznanje.
Dobroveče svima. Ja se zahvaljujem svima prisutnima i zahvaljujem se članovima Saveta Muzeja primenjene umetnosti na ovom lepom priznanju. Zahvalila bih se u ime svih članova Dokomomo Srbija. Neki od njih su prisutni večeras. Ovo priznanje nam dolazi u godini koja nije najzahvalnija za modernističku baštinu koja je u ovom trenutku više nego ugrožena, ali mi nastavljamo svoj rad kao i do sada i čak i van delovanja Dokomamo Srbije, sada je šira zajednica na neki način uključena i u taj aktivistički rad i u zaštitu i generalno i u sva dešavanja oko modernističke baštine u Srbiji generalno. Hvala vam puno još jednom.
Da što pre pobegnete Sabine. Nastavit ćemo dalje, sada zapravo sa nagradama, odnosno pohvalama, nagradama Salona koje dodeljuje žiri Salona. Žiri Salona ove godine je radio u sastavu Zoran Abadić, Milena Stojković, Dejan Lah, Miljana Zeković i Saša Begović. Ja molim sada predstavnike žirija da dođu ovde i da stanu iza mene, bar ko je tu. Ja se nadam da će i Saša u nekom momentu da uđe kroz ova vrata. Ja ću za početak krenuti od pohvala Salona. Pohvale Salona, prva pohvala Salona ide za studentski rad. Pročitat ću rečenice koje negde znači obrazloženje šta je zapravo nagrađeno u određenim radovima, važi za sve nagrade. Znači, pohvala Salona za studentski rad, za reprezentaciju arhitektonske ideje, autor Marija Stojković, a ime projekta Izgraditi život iz korena. Ako je Marija tu, nek nam se pridruži ovde na stage. Dođemo. Čestitam. Ćemo s slikom. Aha. Druga, pošto mi tek sad objavljujemo nagrade, tako da autori će verovatno biti iznenađeni ili neće. Druga pohvala Salona, takođe za studentski rad, za snagu koncepta i arhitektonskog izraza, Aleksandra Kalezić, ime projekta Mesto trećeg prostora, antiratni muzej. Da li je tu? Čestitam. Sledeća pohvala Salona za još jedan studentski rad, fokusirana pohvala na arhitektonski crtež, autorka Sofija Spajić, za projekat Fantastični pejzaži, Dreamscapes, arhiviranje fragmenata mašte, kako ljudi žele da pamte i budu zapamćeni. Sofija se nije nadala, tako da... Sada prelazimo nastavljamo sa pohvalama, sada za segment izložbe koji se zvao Presek misli i prva pohvala ide publikaciji za negovanje specifičnog arhitektonskog tematskog okvira, publikaciji Saveza sa inženjera i tehničara Srbije, estetika, arhitekture i urbanizma danas, zbornik radova, urednik Igor Marić. Igoru ćemo predati ovo. Sledeća pohvala Salona za eksperiment. Autor Andrej Josifovski, pijanista, ime projekta Zaspanka za razmernik. Nastavit ćemo dalje. Pohvala Salona za rešenje studentskog stanovanja, autorski tim Studio Taktika, Dalija Dukanac i Stefan Đorđević. Nadam se da nas gledaju na YouTube-u i da se sada nerviraju. Pozdravit ćemo ih. Sledeća pohvala Salona, takođe za jedan nerealizovan projekat, za kreativnu reprezentaciju konkursnog rešenja, autorski tim AKVS arhitektura, Anđela Karabašević Suđum i Vladislav Suđum. Naredna pohvala Salona ide za jedan realizovani rad, odnosno za jednu realizaciju. To je pohvala Salona za inventivnu upotrebu materijala u interijeru, autorski tim Studio Freja Architects, Kristina, koji vi stoji nonen hatla mađijan. Ja se nadam da sam do kraja izgledao. Još jedna pohvala Salona za još jedan izvedeni interijer, za pristup prostornoj organizaciji u interijeru, studio Cherry Art Hub, Nevena Vujasinović i Bogdan Milojković. Pa dobro. Možda ćemo na kraju ostati bez publike, bit će svi oni. Čestitam. Dobro, sve pohvale Salona smo prošli i sada ćemo ići sa nagradama Salona. Nagrade Salona, prva nagrada koju dodeljujemo večeras, jeste, ja mislim, samo jedna potvrda prošlogodišnjeg priznanja, znači ne radi se o istim nagradama, to je za doprinos strateškom razvoju nacionalne arhitektonske misli, struke i građane sredine, publikacija Arhitektura za nas, nacionalna arhitektonska strategija do 2023 do 2025, urednici Božana Lukić, Nebojša Antešević i Tijana Pejić, pa se dođite i priđite i primite nagradu. Jeste. Bradica se živi, čestite. Čestite. Vi imate još i ovu lepu kocku. Pa uzet ću. Imate još ovu jednu. Dakle, nagrada Salona, osim ove diplome, podrazumeva i ovu divnu staklenu kocku. Tako da, sledeću nagradu Salona dodeljuje se za jednoporodični objekat autorskom timu A2 arhitektura, Dijana Džemović-Anđelković i Vladimir Anđelković za projekat Kuća Ri. Njima ćemo morati da nagradu dostavimo drugačije. Sledeća nagrada Salona, ovog puta za doprinos višeporodičnoj stambenoj arhitekturi, za autorski tim Danilo Dangubić Architects, ime projekta Skew House. Pre nego što pređemo na onu najznačajniju nagradu, ili barem za najzvučniju nagradu, za veliku nagradu Salona, odnosno Grand Prix, imamo takođe jedan legat prošlogodišnjeg Salona, a to je nagrada publike. To je, kao kažem, jedna stvar koja je takođe bila zanimljiva od prošle godine, a to je kako zapravo publika koja poseća, koja ih je bilo, čini mi se, ove godine, čini mi se oko 3.500 posetilaca, na svojim kupljenim ulaznicama su mogli da glasaju za neki od radova i ti glasovi su na kraju prebrojani i dobili smo ovo što se zove nagrada publike, a nagrada publike na 46. Salonu arhitekture ide studiju Mapa Architects Predrag Milutinović. Za kuću Tolstojeva 42. Peđa koji je, ja mislim, bio redovni posetilac svih naših događaja ovih mesec dana, baš večeras je rešio da ne dođe. Umorio se. Ali mu ja od srca čestitam na ovoj nagradi, naročito što dolazi od publike koja ima svoje, naravno, mišljenje. Za veliku nagradu Salona, odnosno za Grand Prix, ja neću dodeliti, već ću za to pozvati Milenu Stojković da kao zvanično predsednicu žirija 46. Salona arhitekture pročita obrazloženje za veliku nagradu i da tu nagradu zapravo i dodeli. Izvolim.
Dakle, u ime svojih kolega prvo bih da zahvalim muzeju i Slobodanu što su nas pozvali da budemo u ovogodišnjem žiriju. Dakle, žiri u sastavu dr. Miljana Zeković, prošlogodišnja dobitnica Grand Prix-a, Zoran Abadić, Saša Begović i Dejan Lah. I ja smo jednoglasno odlučili da ovogodišnje Grand Prix Salona arhitekture se dodeli Razvojnom centru Ingrid Schneider Electric Hub, studija Zabrijski. Dobrodošla, ne znam koliko ovih ide sa tebi. Evo jedna za početak. Čestitam. Hvala. Dakle, tema rekonstrukcije, transformacije, savremene adaptacije i prostornog korišćenja zatečenih kvalitetnih arhitektonskih struktura i kuća je nešto najodrživije što možemo uraditi za naše gradove i na svim nivoima dopriniti zajednici i urbanoj sredini. Transformacija hale u velikom industrijskom kompleksu Nov Kabel u Novom Sadu temeljena je na prepoznavanju, prezervaciji, rekonstrukciji i savremenoj reinterpretaciji njenih prostorno-konstruktivnih i funkcionalnih kvaliteta. Kvalitetna dela nasleđa industrijske arhitekture često nisu prepoznata kao izuzetan prostorni potencijal. Uprkos tome što postojeća struktura nije bila pod zaštitom, arhitekti su je tretirali kao da jeste i prepoznali su zatečenu vrednost industrijskog nasleđa. Ona je zadržana i u postojećim elementima prefabrikovane nosive konstrukcije, ali i u njenom karakteru, identitetu i atmosferi svih novo projektovanih prostora i elemenata. Ovaj veliki industrijski objekat je tretiran u celosti i dodate su mu kvalitetne prostorne intervencije. Postojeća struktura je definisana u prefabrikovanim AB nosačima, a najbitnije za transformaciju ovog prostora bilo je uvođenje i strateško postavljanje 4 velika atrijuma, otvorenih bašti sa vegetacijom u unutrašnjim gabaritima u kojima zaposleni mogu da se odmaraju ili rade. Time se uvodi zelenilo i prirodno svetlo po sredini dubokog plana klasične hale i samim tim stvara se ujednačeni kvalitet radnog prostora po čitavoj dubini osnove. Isto tako značajna za prostornu organizaciju i funkcionalnost bilo je strateško pozicioniranje galerije po obodnom prstenu, koja i na tom delu fasade uvodi zelenilo kao bitan element oblikovanja projekta, ali i atmosfere čitavog interijera. Bitno je naglasiti da je čitav središnji prostor hale ostao slobodan cijelom visinom i da bez bilo kakve specifične funkcije, da bi služio kao unutrašnji javni prostor interakcije svih zaposlenih. Koncept interijera u potpunosti prati ideju fluidnosti prostora i uvodi koncept kreiranja radnih scenografija. Karakterišu ga raznolikost, atmosfera, funkcionalnost zona i formacija mobilnog namještaja u okviru brojnih prostornih celina u kojima su zelenilo, prozračnost i svetlost inkorporirani u radni prostor više od 1000 zaposlenih. Transformacija i adaptacija objekta doprinosi uštedi ugrađenog ugljen dioksida uz prirodne i pasivne fasade, oaze i atrijume. Potrošnja vode je smanjena kroz sakupljanje kišnice, a objekat se delimično i snabdeva zelenom energijom kroz sopstvene solarne panele. Ovaj integrisani pristup projektovanju doneo je LEED Platinum sertifikaciju. Rezultat je, dakle, izuzetan objekat u svim aspektima arhitekture i interijera, tehničkih i funkcionalnih elemenata uz istovremeno postizanje najviših standarda energetske efikasnosti, funkcionalnosti i komfora savremenog radnog prostora.
Hvala ti, Milena, na iscrpnom obrazloženju, ali mislim da je jako važno, zato što uvek imamo, kao kažem, nagrade tome služe da postoji debata o tome da li su dodeljene kako treba. Mislim da ovo obrazloženje govori o tome da je žiri stvarno na jako temeljen način, ja tome svedočim, žirirao i pregledao sve radove i da njihova ocena zaista, mogu da kažem, stoje iza njihovog žiriranja. Ja bi pre nego što zaključimo i pređemo na možda onaj najlepši deo, a to je koktel nakon ove dodele nagrada, još jednom samo zahvalio našim sponzorima i pozvao bi ih da priđu ovde i da im uručimo ovu zahvalnicu. To je Alumil. Možete doći. Ako Srbija, Rehau, Saint-Gobain, da li imamo predstavnika, i Mega Koncept, da li je to znači? Takođe bi, iako one su ovde ispred da bi moglo sve da funkcioniše, zahvalio našim volonterkama Mileni Marković, Anastasiji Novković, Anđeli Stevanović i Emilije Vuković i takođe Vedrani Bogdanović na zaista poslu velikom poslu koje su radile i da zaista bez njih takođe ovaj salon ne bi mogao da funkcioniše. I ja zapravo na kraju pozivam na još jedan aplauz za sve dobitnike nagrada i želim i ovom prilikom na kraju da se zahvalim svim kolegama i koleginicama koji su ne samo učestvovali na 46. Salonu arhitekture kao izlagači, već i svim kolegama i koleginicama koji su poslali prijavu za učešće na salonu. Ja mislim da selekcija uvek može biti šira i da mnogo više radova nego što je zapravo moguće kod nas izložiti zaslužuje da bude izložen na salonu i pozivam kolege i koleginice da i naredne godine konkurišu za izložbu i da konkurišu na izložbu salona, a mi ćemo se kao Muzej primenjene umetnosti, ali takođe i kao Savet salona potruditi da sledeći salon bude podjednako dobar, a mi se nadamo još bolji. Pozdravljam vas još jednom i pozivam vas na koktel ispred i takođe za učesnike salona mogućnost da preuzmu katalog salona. Vidimo se sledeće godine na 47. salonu arhitekture. Hvala vam. Hoćemo slikanje da obavimo.